The doors did not open for uncertainty. They opened for power, for men whose names carried weight before they even entered the room, for deals that shaped cities, for decisions that ended lives without ever being spoken out loud. The kind of place where silence was not empty, it was controlled. And tonight, that control was absolute. The ballroom stretched wide beneath towering crystal chandeliers, each one casting a warm, golden glow over polished marble floors and carefully arranged tables. Every detail was precise, every movement measured. Wealth was not displayed here to impress. It was used to establish hierarchy. This was not just a gathering. It was a system, and everyone inside it understood their place. Until the moment she walked in. Elena Voss did not pause at the entrance. She stepped forward as if she belonged, her movement steady, her posture straight, her expression calm enough to avoid immediate attention, but not enough to disappear, because disappearing was not her intention. The room did not react instantly. It never did. Places like this were trained to absorb change slowly, to evaluate before responding. But something shifted the second she crossed the threshold. Subtle, almost invisible, but real, because Elena Voss did not arrive alone. She was holding a child. The baby rested quietly against her, wrapped in soft, light fabric that contrasted sharply with the structured elegance of her outfit. The child was small, still, unaware of the way the room it had just entered, but the room was aware of the child. Elena moved forward without hesitation, her steps controlled, measured, balanced between confidence and restraint. She did not rush. She did not slow. She moved with intention, the kind that did not ask for permission. The emotional hook settled beneath the surface of the moment. A woman who walks into danger alone is bold, but a woman who walks into danger carrying something valuable is not just bold, she is prepared. Her presence did not match the environment. That was the first thing people noticed. Not her appearance, not her posture, her difference, because everyone else in that room had been invited, expected, accounted for. She had not. A guard near the entrance shifted slightly, his attention narrowing just enough to register her presence. His gaze moved from her face, calm, composed, to the child in her arms, then back again. Recognition did not come, but suspicion did, and in a place like this, suspicion was enough. Elena felt it immediately, not the guard, the shift, because awareness like hers did not depend on direct observation. It relied on patterns, on changes, on silence that carried meaning, and the silence had changed. She continued forward, not toward the center of the room, not toward the exits, but somewhere in between, balanced, calculated, as if she understood exactly how visibility worked in a place like this, because she did. Her gaze moved slightly, never lingering too long, but taking in everything, the spacing between tables, the positioning of security, the quiet communication between men who did not need words to understand each other. Nothing escaped her. Not the way conversations paused just a fraction longer when she passed. Not the way eyes followed, carefully, discreetly, but consistently. Not the way the system around her began to adjust, because it was adjusting. And that meant one thing. She had been noticed. The baby shifted slightly in her arms, a small, natural movement that contrasted sharply with the controlled environment around them. Elena adjusted her hold instinctively, her movement soft but precise, protective, not emotional. There was a difference, and that difference mattered, because nothing about Elena Voss suggested uncertainty, but nothing about her suggested comfort either. She did not belong here, and yet she had come anyway. Her breathing remained steady, but her awareness sharpened with each step, because every second she remained inside this room increased the risk. Recognition was not immediate, but it was inevitable, and inevitability was dangerous. The environment around her continued to function, but the rhythm had changed. Conversations no longer flowed as smoothly. Movements were no longer as natural, because something had entered the system that did not align. Elena reached the edge of one of the central spaces, stopping just long enough to appear deliberate, but not long enough to seem uncertain. Her position now was visible, not exposed, but present, exactly where she needed to be. The emotional tension deepened quietly. The most dangerous place is not where people are watching you. It is where people are trying not to. A man at one of the nearby tables leaned slightly, his attention shifting toward her. Not obvious, not confrontational. Observing, analyzing. His gaze moved from her face to the child in her arms. And then it stayed. That was the moment something changed. Because the child was not just unexpected. It was wrong. Elena felt it again. That shift, stronger this time, more focused. Because attention was no longer casual. It was forming. Her fingers adjusted slightly against the fabric wrapped around the baby, not out of nervousness, but readiness. Because she knew something clearly. This moment would not remain quiet for long. Her presence alone was already a disruption. But the child was something else entirely. A variable. And variables did not exist in a place like this without consequence. Elena's gaze lifted slightly, her eyes moving across the room with purpose now, not scanning, locating, because she had not come here blindly. She had come for someone, and someone was already aware of her, even if he had not yet appeared. The awareness settled into her posture, subtle but undeniable. Her calm did not break, but it shifted from passive to prepared, because the moment she had been moving toward was close, very close. The baby remained quiet, unaware of the tension building around it, but its presence was no longer unnoticed, not by the room, and not by the system controlling it. A second guard adjusted his position near one of the side entrances, his movement small but precise. Another followed. The structure was tightening, not visibly, but effectively, because this was not how they handled threats. This was how they handled unknowns. And Elena was both. The emotional hook deepened. The most dangerous kind of attention is not when people react. It's when they start preparing. Elena's step slowed slightly, her body remaining composed, her breathing steady, her expression unchanged. But inside, everything sharpened, because she could feel it now. The moment had arrived, not fully, but enough. A quiet whisper moved through the room, soft, controlled, but fast, because information traveled quickly in places like this, faster than movement, faster than reaction. And once it started, it did not stop. The man who had been watching her leaned closer to someone beside him, his voice low, his words brief. But those words carried weight, because they were not a question. They were a recognition. Elena did not turn. She did not react. But she knew, because the silence changed again. This time, completely. The room did not grow louder. It grew quieter. And that quiet was not calm. It was tension, the kind that built before something irreversible happened. Elena's grip on the child remained steady, her posture unchanged, her presence controlled, but her awareness locked, because now it had begun. Across the room, attention shifted, not randomly, but collectively, like a system aligning toward a single point, her and the child. The whisper spread, not loudly, not openly, but enough. Enough to reach the people who mattered, enough to reach him. The name did not need to be spoken, because in a place like this, everyone knew who controlled everything, and more importantly, who would respond. Elena remained still, her calm intact, her presence unshaken, because she had expected this, not the exact moment, but the outcome, because walking into a place like this was never about avoiding attention. It was about controlling when it arrived. And now, it had. The final shift settled into place as the whisper reached its destination, because the truth had surfaced. Quietly, but completely. And once truth entered a room like this, everything changed. The cliffhanger settled with sharp, chilling precision. Someone in the room leaned in and whispered the words that froze everything. The baby in Elena Voss's arms belonged to the Don's biggest enemy. The whisper did not travel far. It didn't need to, because in a room built on power, information did not spread randomly. It moved with purpose, directed toward the one person who needed to hear it. And the moment it reached him, everything shifted. Dominic Callahan did not sit at the center of the room. He didn't need to. Power, in its most dangerous form, did not demand visibility. It created gravity. And everything in that room, every movement, every decision, every breath, was already pulled toward him whether people realized it or not. He stood near the far end of the ballroom, partially removed from the crowd, where the lighting softened just enough to create distance, but not enough to hide him, because Dominic Callahan was never hidden. He was simply observed carefully. His posture was relaxed, his expression neutral, his presence controlled in a way that made control itself feel effortless. He did not speak. He did not move unnecessarily. And yet, no one ignored him, because ignoring him was not an option. The emotional hook settled into the moment with quiet intensity. The most powerful man in the room is not the one who demands attention. It's the one who controls it without asking. Dominic's empire was not built on noise. It was built on precision. Every deal, every alliance, every decision had been made with the same calculated intent that now defined the room around him. Nothing in his world was accidental. Nothing existed without purpose. And nothing escaped his awareness. That was what made him feared. Not violence, not reputation. Control, complete, absolute, unquestioned. Men in the room did not look at him directly for long. Their conversations adjusted when he shifted slightly. Their posture changed when he entered their space. Not out of respect alone, out of understanding. Because Dominic Callahan did not react. He decided, and decisions in his world were final. The whisper reached him quietly, carried by someone who knew exactly how to deliver information without disrupting the balance of the room. It was brief, precise, enough. Dominic did not respond immediately. He did not turn his head. He did not change his expression, because men like him did not react to words. They processed them, and in that stillness, something shifted, subtle, invisible to most, but real, because the information he had just received did not belong. His gaze moved slightly, not searching, not scanning, locating, because he already knew where to look. And then he saw her, Elena Vos, standing exactly where she had positioned herself, not hidden, not exposed, intentional. His eyes did not linger in shock. They fixed, locked, because recognition for him was not emotional. It was immediate, precise, final. His attention moved from her face to the child in her arms. And in that single moment, the room lost its balance, not outwardly, internally, because Dominic Callahan did not look twice at things that didn't matter. And right now, he was looking. The tension deepened instantly, because everyone who understood power understood one thing. If the Dom was paying attention, something was wrong. Dominic's expression did not change, but his focus sharpened, because what he was seeing did not align with reality. The child, small, still, unaware, but the details did not match what he knew to be true. His mind did not hesitate. It did not question. It calculated. Victor Hale. The name formed instantly, not as a thought, but as a connection, because there were only a few things in this world that could disrupt Dominic Callahan's system, and Victor Hale was one of them. Their rivalry was not public. It did not need to be. It existed beneath everything, in deals that collapsed without explanation, in territories that shifted without warning, in silence that carried tension instead of peace. They did not declare war. They prevented it, because war between men like them destroyed everything. And yet, right now, something had entered Dominic's world that belonged to Victor. The emotional hook sharpened. The most dangerous enemies are not the ones who attack. They are the ones who wait and place something inside your world that you cannot ignore. Dominic took a single step forward, not rushed, not aggressive, but deliberate. And that one step changed the room, because movement from him meant action. Conversation stopped, not loudly, not obviously, but enough to create space, enough to shift attention, because now this was no longer just a presence. It was a situation. Dominic's gaze never left Elena, and Elena felt it not as fear, as pressure, the kind that did not push. It weighed, because she knew exactly who was looking at her now. and more importantly, what it meant. Dominic did not approach her immediately because distance gave him control, and control was everything. His eyes move again, slower this time, more focused. The child, wrapped carefully, held protectively, too carefully, because this was not a casual presence. This was deliberate, and deliberate meant purpose. His mind moved ahead, connecting what he knew with what he was seeing. Victor Hale did not leave loose ends. He did not create vulnerabilities, and he did not lose control of anything that belonged to him, especially not something like this, which meant one thing. This was not supposed to exist. Dominic's jaw tightened slightly, almost unnoticeable, but enough, because now this was no longer just observation. It was contradiction. The psychological tension expanded through the room, even if no one fully understood why, because something about this moment was wrong. Elena remained still, her posture controlled, her expression calm, but her awareness was locked entirely on him, because she could see it. The shift, not emotional, strategic, because Dominic Callahan was not trying to understand what was happening. He was trying to understand why it was happening here. With him, that was what made him dangerous. He did not react to problems. He found their origin, and once he did, he removed them. The distance between them remained, but the connection was already established, because both of them understood something clearly now. This moment was not accidental. The baby shifted slightly again, a small movement, but enough to draw further attention. Dominic saw it. Of course he did. He saw everything. And that movement confirmed something deeper, because it was real, not staged, not symbolic. Real, which made the situation far more dangerous. The emotional tension tightened further. The moment something impossible becomes real, it stops being a mystery and becomes a threat. Dominic's final step forward was slower than the first, measured, because now he had reached his conclusion. Not fully, but enough. His gaze did not leave the child, because everything about it contradicted what he knew. Victor Hale's child was not supposed to be alive. That had been confirmed. Final, unquestioned, handled. And Dominic Callahan did not operate on uncertainty. He operated on facts, which meant if the child was here, then something had gone wrong. Or worse, something had been hidden. His eyes lifted slowly back to Elena, and in that moment, the silence in the room became absolute, because now this was no longer about observation. This was confrontation, not spoken, but inevitable. Elena did not move. She did not step back. She did not break, because she had expected this. Not the exact moment, but the outcome, because she had not come here to avoid him. She had come here for him. The final realization formed in Dominic's mind with cold precision, not through emotion, not through assumption, through logic, through pattern, through everything that did not align. And when it did, everything changed. The cliffhanger settled with sharp, chilling certainty. Dominic Callahan understood something that should not have been possible. The baby in Elena Voss's arms was not supposed to be alive. The silence did not break. It tightened, because once Dominic Callahan understood that the child in Elena Voss's arms was not supposed to exist, the situation no longer belonged to uncertainty. It belonged to consequence. The space between them remained unchanged in distance, but everything within it shifted. What had once been observation was now calculation. What had once been presence was now pressure. And at the center of it all was the child, small, still, unaware, but no longer insignificant. The emotional hook settled into the moment with sharp precision. The most dangerous wars are not started by men. They are started by what men are willing to protect. Elena adjusted her hold slightly, not out of discomfort, but in tension. Her arms tightened just enough to signal something clear, something deliberate. This child was not negotiable. Her posture remained controlled, her expression calm, but the shift in her stance made one thing undeniable. She was not here to explain. She was here to hold her ground. Across from her, Dominic did not move closer. He did not need to, because distance in this moment gave him something more valuable than proximity: perspective. His gaze remained fixed on the child, not out of confusion, but focus. Every detail mattered now. The way the child was wrapped, the way it responded to movement, the way Elena held it, not as a burden, but as something worth protecting. That detail was critical, because protection implied value. And value, in a world like his, always had a cost. The name settled fully now in his mind. Victor Hale. It did not arrive with anger. It arrived with clarity. Because Victor Hale was not just a rival. He was a mirror, the only man who had built something that could stand against Dominic's control. Not openly, not loudly, but effectively. Where Dominic created structure, Victor created unpredictability. Where Dominic enforced order, Victor exploited it. They did not operate the same way, but they understood each other perfectly. And that understanding was what made them dangerous to one another. The rivalry between them had never been about territory alone. It had been about dominance. Not who controlled more, but who controlled better. And in that quiet war, both men had established one rule without ever speaking it: nothing personal, because personal made things uncontrollable, and uncontrollable destroyed everything. The child in Elena's arms broke that rule completely. Dominic's gaze sharpened slightly, not outwardly, but internally, as the implications began to form with greater clarity. Victor Hale did not leave vulnerabilities. He did not create loose ends. And he did not allow anything connected to him to exist without purpose, which meant this child was not an accident. It was either a mistake or a message, and Victor Hale did not make mistakes. The tension in the room deepened, not through movement, but through stillness. Conversations had faded entirely now. No one pretended to continue. No one attempted to ignore what was unfolding, because everyone understood something instinctively. This moment was not small. It was the kind of moment that shifted outcomes. Elena felt the weight of that attention pressing against her, but she did not step back. She did not adjust her position. She did not lower her gaze, because doing any of those things would have changed the balance. And balance was the only thing keeping this moment from breaking completely. The baby shifted again, a soft movement, natural, unforced, alive. That single detail reinforced everything, because existence was now undeniable. The emotional tension sharpened further. The most dangerous truth is not what people believe. It's what they can no longer deny. Dominic took another step forward, slow, measured, closing distance just enough to change the dynamic, but not enough to surrender control, because this was not a confrontation driven by emotion. It was one driven by understanding. His presence now carried something different, not just authority. Focus, directed, precise, and entirely centered on one thing: the child. Elena adjusted her stance slightly in response, her body turning just enough to place herself more directly between Dominic and the baby. Not obvious, but intentional. A barrier, small, but meaningful. Dominic saw it immediately. Of course he did. He saw everything. And that movement told him more than any words could have. She was not just holding the child. She was defending it. That meant she understood its importance. And if she understood its importance, then she understood him. At least, part of him. The psychological pressure intensified between them, expanding outward into the room like something invisible but undeniable. Because this was no longer just about a child. It was about what that child represented. A breach. A connection, a variable neither side had accounted for. Dominic's mind moved through possibilities with cold precision, eliminating what didn't fit, focusing only on what remained. Victor Hale's child had been accounted for, handled, removed. There had been no uncertainty, no error, no survival, which meant if this child existed, then something had been hidden. And if something had been hidden, then someone had allowed it. His gaze shifted back to Elena, studying her now not as an intruder, but as part of the equation, because she was not random. That much was clear. Her control, her positioning, her timing, none of it suggested coincidence. She had come here knowing exactly what this moment would become. which meant she had brought the child here for a reason. The emotional hook deepened. The most dangerous person in a room full of power is not the strongest. It's the one who already knows what will happen next. Elena held his gaze now, steady, unwavering, her expression calm, but no longer passive, because this was the moment, the one she had built toward. Not emotionally. Strategically, her breathing remained controlled, her posture firm, her presence balanced between resistance and readiness, because she understood something clearly. This was not about convincing him. This was about forcing him to see. The room held its silence. Heavy, unmoving, because no one dared interrupt what was happening. And no one needed to. The tension spoke louder than anything else could. Dominic's focus returned to the child once more, slower this time, deeper, because something about it did not align, not just its existence. Something else, something subtle, something familiar. His eyes narrowed slightly, the smallest shift, but enough to signal a deeper level of attention, because now he wasn't just analyzing the situation. He was analyzing the details, the child's features, the structure, the presence. And in that moment, something shifted, not outwardly, internally, because the impossible had already become real. And now, something else was forming, a connection, faint, but undeniable. His mind resisted it at first, not out of denial, but out of logic, because logic did not support what he was beginning to see. But logic was no longer enough. The tension reached its peak, not through action, but realization, because Dominic Callahan understood something in that moment that changed everything. This was not just Victor Hale's child. It was something else, something more, something connected. The silence in the room became absolute, because even without knowing why, everyone felt it. That shift, that moment where everything changed. Elena saw it in his eyes. The recognition, not complete, but enough. Enough to confirm what she already knew, because she had not come here to introduce the child. She had come here to reveal it. The final realization settled into Dominic's mind with cold, precise certainty. And once it formed, there was no undoing it. The cliffhanger landed with sharp, chilling clarity. Dominic Callahan realized something far more dangerous than the child's existence. The baby in Elena Voss's arms was not just Victor Hale's. It was connected to him too. The realization did not break the moment. It deepened it. Because the instant Dominic Callahan understood that the child in Elena Voss's arms was connected to him, not just Victor Hale, the situation shifted beyond rivalry, beyond territory, beyond control. It became personal. And personal was something he had eliminated from his world a long time ago. The silence between them did not weaken. It sharpened. Because now, this was no longer about what the child represented. It was about what Elena knew. The emotional hook settled with quiet intensity. The most dangerous threat is not the one standing in front of you. It's the one who knows something about you that no one else should. Elena did not move. She did not speak. But her presence had changed, not in position, in weight, because she was no longer just holding a secret. She was holding leverage. Dominic saw it instantly. Of course he did, because leverage always revealed itself in stillness. His gaze fixed on her with greater precision now, not searching for answers, but identifying patterns. And Elena was no longer an unknown. She was a variable with intention. That was what made her dangerous, because she had not stumbled into this room. She had entered it deliberately. The connection between them did not form in that moment. It had existed before, buried, forgotten, or perhaps ignored. Dominic's mind moved through memory with the same calculated discipline he applied to everything else, not emotionally, not randomly, strategically, because there were very few people who had ever come close enough to his world to understand it from the inside. Fewer still who had survived it. Elena Voss was one of them, not by accident, by design. Years ago, she had not entered his world the way others had. She had been placed, not as a threat, not as an asset, something in between. Someone who observed more than she spoke. Someone who moved through systems without disrupting them. Someone who understood structure, not from the outside, but from within. At the time, she had been useful. That was how Dominic categorized people. Useful or irrelevant. Elena had been neither, which meant she had been something else. Unpredictable. And unpredictability was something he did not tolerate. That was why she had disappeared. Not removed, not destroyed. Allowed to vanish. Because removing her would have created questions. And questions created exposure. So he had let her go. And in doing so, he had made one assumption. That whatever she had seen was incomplete. Standing in front of him now, he understood how wrong that assumption had been. The tension thickened as the past began to surface beneath the present, threading itself into the moment without needing to be spoken. Elena had not just survived after disappearing. She had learned, adapted, prepared, and now she had returned, not empty-handed, but carrying something that could not be ignored. The child. Dominic's gaze shifted briefly toward it again, but this time it was not confusion driving his focus. It was confirmation, because the connection he had sensed moments ago was no longer uncertain. It was real, and Elena knew it. The emotional tension deepened. The most dangerous kind of knowledge is not what someone discovers. It's what they wait to reveal at the exact right moment. Elena adjusted her hold on the baby again, her movement steady, controlled, but no longer purely protective. Now, they were deliberate, because she understood something clearly. This was no longer about entering the room. This was about what happened next. And what happened next depended on him. Dominic's presence shifted subtly, not outwardly, but in a way that altered the dynamic completely, because now he was not observing her. He was engaging her. Not through words, through understanding, because everything about her told him one thing. She was not here to survive. She was here to reveal something. And revelation, in a room like this, was dangerous. Elena's past was no longer a question. It was a factor, and the way she held herself now, calm, steady, unshaken under the weight of the room, confirmed something critical. She had been waiting for this moment, not reacting to it. That realization shifted the balance between them, slightly, but enough, because power did not always change dramatically. Sometimes it adjusted, and right now it had. The psychological tension intensified, pressing against every silent second that passed between them. Dominic stepped closer, not aggressively, not slowly, exactly as much as the moment required, closing the distance just enough to remove illusion. Just enough to force reality into place. Elena did not step back, because stepping back would have changed everything, and she could not afford that. Not now, not when everything was aligned exactly as it needed to be. Her breathing remained steady, her posture controlled, her gaze unwavering, but inside, her focus sharpened, because she knew what he was doing. He was not trying to understand the situation. He was trying to understand her. And once he did, everything would change. The emotional hook sharpened. The moment someone understands you completely, you either lose control or take it. Elena did neither. She held it, balanced, because that was what this moment required. Not reaction, control. Dominic's mind continued to move, connecting past to present, cause to effect, until only one conclusion remained. This was not random. This was not revenge. This was not even risk. This was strategy. Elena had taken something from Victor Hale, something that should not have been accessible, something that should not have existed, and she had brought it here. To him, that meant one thing. She was not running from Victor. She was confronting Dominic. That distinction changed everything, because confrontation implied purpose, and purpose always had a target. Dominic's gaze sharpened further, his focus now entirely locked on her, because now the question was no longer what she was holding. It was why she had brought it to him. The silence stretched, heavy and deliberate, as both of them remained exactly where they were, neither moving, neither speaking, because words would only weaken what this moment had become. The room held its breath without realizing it, because everyone felt it now. The shift, the tension, the inevitability. Something was about to happen, Not loudly, not visibly, but definitively. Elena's grip on the child remained steady, her posture unbroken, her presence unwavering, because she understood something now that no one else in the room did. This moment was not about the past. It was about exposure. The truth had already been brought into the room. Now, it just needed to be seen. Dominic reached his final conclusion, not through instinct, but through logic, through everything that aligned, and everything that didn't. Because there was only one reason someone like Elena Voss would walk into his world carrying something like this. Not to negotiate, not to survive, but to force something into the open. The final realization settled with cold, precise certainty. The cliffhanger landed with quiet, devastating force. Dominic Callahan understood the truth in that moment. Elena Voss hadn't come back to confront him. She came back to expose something. It created action. Because in a world built on control, chaos was not allowed to grow. It was contained. Immediately, silently, completely, the shift happened without announcement, without visible command. But the room felt it, because Dominic did not need to raise his voice to take control. Control was already his. The emotional hook settled with sharp clarity. In a system where power depends on control, even one uncontrolled moment can destroy everything. And Dominic would not allow that moment to exist. His posture remained steady, his expression unchanged, but the environment around him adjusted instantly. Subtle movements rippled through the room. Guards repositioning, exits tightening, attention redirecting without drawing focus. To anyone unaware, it looked like nothing had changed, but everything had, because now the situation was no longer unfolding. It was being managed. Elena felt it immediately, not through what she saw, but through what she couldn't. The space around her had narrowed, invisible boundaries forming, paths closing, options disappearing. Dominic had taken control, and he had done it without breaking the silence. That alone confirmed what she already knew. This was his world, and in his world, nothing moved without permission. Dominic stepped closer, again, but this time, it was different, not an approach, a claim, because distance implied uncertainty, and there was no uncertainty left. His gaze remained fixed on her, sharper now, more deliberate, measuring not just her presence, but her intent, because intention was the only variable he had not yet eliminated. The baby shifted slightly in Elena's arms, a small, natural movement, but in this moment, it carried weight far beyond itself. Because the child was no longer just a symbol. It was the center of everything. Dominic's eyes flicked to it for only a fraction of a second, but that was enough, because in that single glance, everything was confirmed again. The connection, the threat, the consequence. The child was not just dangerous because of who it belonged to. It was dangerous because of what it represented. And what it revealed, the emotional tension deepened. Some truths are not dangerous because they exist. They are dangerous because they can be proven. And right now, that proof was in Elena's arms. Dominic's mind moved quickly, but not chaotically. Every possibility processed, every outcome evaluated, because this was no longer a simple decision. It was a calculation. Protect or eliminate the child. Elena, the truth. Each option carried consequences. Each path led to exposure in a different form, because eliminating the child would remove the evidence, but not the question. Protecting it would preserve control, but risk revelation. And Elena was the unpredictable factor in all of it, because she had already proven one thing. She was willing to step into danger. That made her harder to control and harder to predict. Dominic's restraint held, but only just. A subtle shift in his jaw. A slight tightening in his expression, small, almost invisible, but real, because for the first time, this was not a situation he had fully anticipated, and that was unacceptable. Elena saw it, not clearly, not completely, but enough, because she had spent years understanding people like him, people who hit everything, except the smallest fractures, and those fractures were where control could be challenged. The psychological battle between them intensified without a single word spoken, because neither of them needed words. This was not a conversation. It was a test. Dominic moved one step closer, closing the space completely now. Close enough to remove distance. Close enough to create pressure. Close enough to control. Elena did not step back, because stepping back meant losing ground, and she could not afford that. Not now. Not with everything balanced on this moment. Her grip on the baby tightened slightly, not out of fear, but out of intent, because she understood what he was thinking. She could see it in the way his attention shifted between her and the child, the calculation, the weighing of outcomes, the decision forming, and she knew something else. If he decided to eliminate the problem, he would not hesitate. That was who he was. That was what made him dangerous. The emotional hook struck deeper. The most powerful people are not the ones who act without thinking. They are the ones who think, and still choose to act without mercy. Elena's breathing remained steady, but her awareness sharpened, because this was the turning point, the moment where control either held or broke. Dominic extended his hand slightly, not enough to touch. Not yet, but enough to signal something clear. Authority, because, in his world, nothing was taken, everything was given, or forced. The gesture was simple, but absolute. He expected compliance. He always did, and he always received it. But Elena did not move, not even slightly. The refusal was silent, but undeniable, and in that refusal, everything shifted again, because now, this was no longer about control alone. It was about resistance. The room felt it, even if they didn't understand it fully, because resistance was rare here, and when it appeared, it was dangerous. Dominic's gaze hardened, not visibly, but internally, because resistance required response, and response required decision. The baby shifted again, a soft, almost unnoticed movement, but it cut through the tension like something far louder, because it reminded both of them of what this truly was. Not just a confrontation, a conflict, with consequences that extended beyond this room, beyond this moment, beyond control. Elena's mind remained focused, her posture unwavering, but her understanding deepened, because now she saw it clearly. Dominic was not just trying to control the situation. He was trying to control the outcome, and the outcome required one thing: the child. Without the child, there was no proof. Without proof, there was no exposure. Without exposure, there was no threat. Everything came back to the same point. The baby, the center of everything. The tension tightened further as the realization settled fully into place. Dominic did not need to say anything. His intention was clear, and Elena understood it completely. Her body remained still, but inside, her resolve sharpened, because now there was no illusion left, no misunderstanding, no possibility of negotiation. This was not a moment that could be talked through. It was a moment that would be decided, one way or another. The emotional tension reached its peak. When control is absolute, the only thing that can challenge it is someone willing to lose everything. Elena adjusted her stance slightly, subtle but intentional, shifting her weight in a way that made one thing clear. She was not giving the child to him. Not now. Not under any condition. Dominic saw it instantly. And that was the moment his decision finalized, because control could not allow defiance to stand. Not here. Not in front of witnesses. Not in a situation where perception mattered. The room tightened further, the invisible structure closing in completely now. There were no open paths left, no unnoticed exits, no accidental opportunities. Everything had been sealed, because Dominic had decided. Elena felt it, the shift, the finality, the inevitability. Her heart beat harder, not from fear, but from certainty, because she knew what came next. Not exactly how, not exactly when, but what. He would not let her leave, not with the baby, not with the truth, not with anything that could break his control. The space between them felt heavier now, charged with something no longer hidden, not tension, decision. Dominic lowered his hand slightly, but his presence did not ease. It intensified because he no longer needed to signal. He had already chosen. And once Dominic Callahan chose something, it happened without delay, without hesitation, without failure. Elena's breath slowed, her grip steady, her mind clear despite everything pressing against her, because she understood one final truth. This was not about winning. This was about surviving long enough to make the truth matter. And that would not be easy. The final moment stretched, thin and fragile, as both of them stood locked in silent opposition. Control versus truth. Power versus exposure. Neither willing to move first. Neither willing to lose. But only one of them owned the system, and systems protected themselves. The cliffhanger landed with cold, undeniable certainty. Elena Voss understood it completely now. Dominic Callahan would never let her walk out of that room, not with a baby. The certainty that Dominic Callahan would not let Elena leave did not end the moment. It deepened it, because now there was no uncertainty left in the room, only consequence. Elena stood exactly where she had been. The child still held firmly in her arms, but the tension between them had shifted into something far more dangerous than control. It had become personal. And when power became personal, it stopped following rules. The emotional hook settled with quiet intensity. Some wars are not fought because of power. They are fought because of something that should have been buried, but never was. Dominic did not move immediately after making his decision. He didn't need to, because the situation had already aligned around him. But his focus had changed, not outwardly, not in a way others could read, but internally. Something had shifted, because this was no longer just about a rival. It was about a past he had controlled, managed, buried, or at least believed he had. Elena saw it, that shift, that subtle fracture beneath his control, because she had not walked into this room blindly. She had come with knowledge, and knowledge was the only thing that could challenge someone like Dominic. The baby stirred slightly again, a soft, almost fragile movement that felt out of place in a room filled with silent power. But that small movement carried weight because it connected everything, the present, the past, and something neither of them could fully ignore anymore. Dominic's gaze dropped to the child again, but this time it lingered, not as a calculation, as recognition. And that was new. The emotional tension deepened. The most dangerous truth is not the one you discover. It's the one you recognize, because it was always yours. Elena's grip tightened slightly, not protectively, but knowingly, because she understood what was happening before he fully did. That was why she had come, not just to expose, to confront. Dominic's mind moved through something he had not allowed himself to revisit in years. Victor Hale, not just a rival, not just an enemy, something else, something older. Because before power had divided them, there had been alignment, not friendship, but trust, the kind that existed between men building something dangerous together, something powerful, something that required loyalty, until it didn't. The past unfolded in fragments within Dominic's thoughts, not chaotic but controlled, like something he had locked away behind deliberate distance. A deal, a partnership, an expansion that had pushed both of them beyond the boundaries of what they once understood. And then, a betrayal, not loud, not obvious, but absolute. Victor had taken something, not money, not territory, something more valuable, something that could not be replaced. That had been the beginning of everything. The war, the separation, the complete destruction of anything that once connected them. Dominic had responded the only way he knew how. He erased Victor from his world, piece by piece, systematically, until there was nothing left except the memory of conflict and the certainty that Victor Hale was no longer a threat, or so he believed. The emotional hook struck deeper. The past doesn't come back to haunt you by accident. It comes back because something in it was never finished. Dominic's gaze lifted from the child to Elena again. Sharper now, more focused, because she was no longer just an interruption. She was the bridge between what had been buried and what was now standing in front of him. Elena did not look away. because she understood something he was only beginning to accept. This wasn't just about Victor. It never had been. Her presence here was proof of that. Dominic stepped closer again, but slower this time. Not to control, to understand, because something inside the situation no longer aligned with his expectations. The child, Victor's child, that had been the assumption, the logical conclusion, the obvious truth. But logic was beginning to fracture, because something about the child didn't fit, not entirely. Elena saw the shift as it formed, because this was the moment she had been waiting for. Not his anger, not his control, his doubt, because doubt was where truth entered. The emotional tension rose. Control is strongest when everything makes sense. It breaks the moment something doesn't. Dominic's mind returned to the past again, sharper now, more focused, not on the betrayal, on what came before it. Details he had dismissed, moments he had overlooked, a meeting, private, unrecorded, a negotiation that had gone further than it should have, and someone else, connected to both of them, not Victor, not him, someone in between, someone who had disappeared after everything fell apart. At the time, it had meant nothing. Now, it meant everything. His gaze returned to the child, longer this time, more intense, because now he wasn't looking at what the child represented. He was looking at what it could be. The realization did not hit all at once. It formed, slowly, dangerously, because it was not just a possibility. It was a contradiction, and contradictions demanded truth. Elena's breathing remained steady, but her awareness sharpened as she watched the exact moment his control shifted again, not breaking, but bending, because this was beyond control. This was personal. She had known it would come to this, because she had not just brought the child here as evidence. She had brought it here as truth, and truth was harder to destroy. Dominic's jaw tightened slightly again, his gaze narrowing not at her, but at the situation itself, because now he was no longer deciding what to do. He was trying to understand what had already happened. The emotional hook deepened. The most dangerous secrets are not the ones hidden from you. They are the ones hidden within your own past. Elena took a slow breath, her stance unchanged, her expression still controlled. But her presence now carried something different, certainty, because she knew something he didn't fully know yet. But he was close, too close. Dominic's thought aligned again, sharper now, more precise. If the child was not just Victor's, then what was it? Why had Victor hidden it? Why had it survived? Why had it been brought here? To him? The questions formed rapidly, each one building on the last, each one leading toward the same unavoidable conclusion. There was something about this child that connected to him, not directly, not obviously, but undeniably. Elena saw the exact moment that realization reached its edge, because his focus changed again, from questioning to recognition, and recognition was irreversible. The room around them faded into nothing, not physically, but mentally, because everything that mattered was now between them, the past, the child, the truth. Dominic took one final step closer, close enough now that the distance between them no longer existed. And still, he did not reach for the child, because now he wasn't sure what it was. That uncertainty was the most dangerous thing of all. Elena held her ground, her grip steady, her gaze unwavering, because this was the moment, the one she had built everything toward, the moment where control met truth, and truth did not step back. The emotional tension reached its peak. Some truths don't destroy you when you learn them. They destroy everything you believed before them. Dominic's mind reached its final conclusion, not as a clear answer, but as a realization he could no longer ignore. This child was not just part of Victor's legacy. It was part of something larger, something connected, something unfinished, something his. The thought did not fully form into words. It didn't need to, because it existed. Clear, unavoidable, dangerous. His gaze locked onto the child one final time. And this time, there was no calculation, only understanding. The cliffhanger settled with cold, undeniable force. Dominic Callahan realized something he could no longer deny. The child in Elena's arms might be his responsibility. The realization that the child might be his responsibility did not settle quietly within Dominic Callahan. It triggered something far more dangerous. Instinct, because responsibility in his world did not exist without consequence, and consequence always attracted attention. The shift in the room was immediate, not loud, not chaotic, but precise, because something had just changed at the highest level of power. And when power shifted, everything connected to it reacted. The emotional hook struck with sharp intensity. One decision made in silence can ignite a war louder than anything ever spoken. Dominic did not look away from the child, but his awareness expanded outward again, because this was no longer contained. It never had been. Elena felt it too, that subtle break in control, the moment where the situation stopped being internal and started becoming external, because what had been hidden was no longer hidden. And people like Victor Hale did not wait for confirmation. They acted. The first sign came as something almost invisible, a delay, a fraction of a second where the rhythm of the room broke. Communication paused. Movement hesitated. For most, it meant nothing. For Dominic, it meant everything, because systems like his did not pause unless something interfered. His gaze sharpened instantly, shifting for just a moment, not away from Elena, but beyond her, scanning, measuring, calculating, because if something had disrupted his control, it was not accidental. It was intentional. The tension escalated silently. The most dangerous attacks are not the ones you see. They are the ones that begin before you realize they've already started. Elena's grip tightened around the baby as her instincts reacted before her thoughts did, because she had lived in that world long enough to recognize one truth. When silence changed, danger followed. The baby shifted again, more restless now, as if sensing something neither of them could fully see yet. And that small movement amplified everything, because now the stakes were no longer abstract. They were immediate. Dominic moved, not toward Elena, not toward the exits, but slightly to the side, positioning, because in a moment like this, positioning meant survival. His body aligned not just with her, but with the entire room, blocking, redirecting, preparing, because whatever was coming would not be allowed to reach its target, not without consequence. Elena saw it and understood it instantly, because this was the first time. He wasn't just controlling the situation. He was preparing to defend it, and that changed everything. The emotional tension deepened. The line between power and protection disappears the moment something becomes personal. Dominic's hand moved slightly, barely noticeable, but enough, and the system responded. Security adjusted. Invisible lines hardened. The room was no longer just controlled. It was fortified, but fortification meant one thing. There was a threat, and it was close. Too close. Elena's breathing slowed, despite the pressure rising around her, because now there was no doubt. Victor Hale knew, or at least his people did, and if they knew, they would not stay outside. They would come, for the child, for the truth, for everything. The air in the room tightened, thick with something no one could name, but everyone could feel. Guests shifted uncomfortably, their awareness rising even if they didn't understand why, because power had a presence. And right now, that presence was unstable. Dominic's focus returned to Elena, not soft, not emotional, but different, because now she was no longer just a disruption. She was part of the threat that extended beyond the room, and that meant she had to be protected, or controlled, or both. The dilemma sharpened instantly. Protect the child and risk war. Eliminate the child and end it before it begins. But now, that second option was no longer simple, because if the child was connected to him, even slightly, elimination was no longer just strategy. It was consequence. The emotional hook struck deeper. The hardest decisions are not between right and wrong. They are between power and something you cannot afford to lose. Elena saw the conflict clearly now. because it was no longer hidden behind control. It was visible, subtle, but undeniable. And for the first time, Dominic Callahan was not operating with absolute certainty. That alone was dangerous. A second disruption followed, more obvious this time. A door at the far end of the room shifted slightly. Not opened, not forced, tested. Dominic noticed immediately. Of course he did. And that was a confirmation. This was not internal. This was an intrusion. The war had not started, but it was at the door. Elena's pulse quickened, her body tightening instinctively around the baby. Because now, this was no longer about truth. This was about survival. Real, immediate, unavoidable. Dominic stepped closer again, his presence sharper, more focused, his control no longer just internal. It extended outward now, dominating the room, suppressing panic before it could form, because panic would destroy everything faster than any external threat. The contrast between chaos and control intensified. Where others would react with fear, he responded with structure. Where others would panic, he eliminated it. But even control had limits, especially when the threat was already inside the system. The baby let out a soft, unsettled sound. Not loud, but enough, because it cut through the tension in a way nothing else could. It reminded both of them what was truly at risk. Elena's arms tightened instinctively, her body shifting slightly as if shielding the child without making it obvious. Because now, there was no illusion left. This child was the center of everything. The reason for the tension, the reason for the threat, the reason a war could begin. Dominic saw the movement, and something in him reacted instantly. Not calculated, not controlled. Instinct, protective. That shift was small, but real, and Elena noticed, because she had been watching for it, waiting for it. The moment where he stopped seeing the child as a variable and started seeing it as something else. That moment had arrived. The emotional tension peaked. The most dangerous wars are not started by enemies. They are started by what you choose to protect. Another shift at the edge of the room. Faster this time. Less subtle. Someone moving where they shouldn't. A position changing without permission. Dominic's gaze snapped toward it instantly, and that was all it took. The system responded. Fast, precise, controlled. But this time, it wasn't enough to fully contain it, because now the threat was active, not waiting, not watching, moving. Elena felt it, the moment where control started to slip. Not completely, but enough. Enough to create risk. Real risk. Her thoughts sharpened instantly, because she understood something critical now. If the situation escalated, the child would not survive it. Not in chaos. Not in crossfire. Not in a war that neither side would hold back in. And Dominic knew that too. Their eyes met again. And this time, there was no calculation left between them, only understanding, because both of them had reached the same conclusion. This moment would decide everything. The pressure in the room reached its breaking point. Movement increased. Tension rose. Control strained. Because the system was being tested. From the outside and from within, Dominic's final decision began forming. Not slowly, not uncertainly, but with a precision that defined everything he did. Because he understood one truth above all else. If he made the wrong move, he would not just lose control. He would start a war. And war did not end cleanly. It destroyed everything. Elena's breathing steadied, despite the chaos building around her, because now she understood something too. She was not just holding the truth. She was holding the trigger. And whatever happened next would not be small. The emotional hook landed with full intensity. Some moments don't give you time to choose carefully. They force you to choose, knowing everything will burn either way. Dominic took one final step, not toward control, not toward elimination, toward decision, because now there was no space left for delay, no room for hesitation, only action. The room held its breath, not literally, but completely, because something was about to happen, something irreversible, something final. Elena tightened her hold on the baby one last time, her body steady despite everything unraveling around her, because she knew this was it, the moment, the edge, the point where everything changed. Dominic's gaze locked onto hers. Sharp, certain, unavoidable, and in that moment, everything balanced on a single choice. The final cliffhanger struck with crushing intensity. One move from either of them could change everything, because the wrong decision now could cost a baby's life and start a war. The moment balanced on a single decision did not break immediately. It stretched, tightened, turned into something heavier than time itself. Because when power, truth, and survival collide, the outcome is never simple. Dominic Callahan stood at the center of it, his control still intact on the surface, but beneath it, everything had changed. The emotional hook settled with quiet force. Some choices don't make you powerful. They reveal who you truly are when power is no longer enough. Elena Voss did not move. Not yet, because she understood something critical. This was no longer about forcing the truth into the open. It was about whether the truth would survive at all. The room around them had reached its limit. Tension no longer built. It held. Barely. Because every person present could feel it. The edge. The point where control either reasserted itself or shattered completely. Dominic's gaze remained locked on Elena. Not cold. Not detached. Different. Because now, he wasn't just seeing her. He was seeing everything she represented. The past. The betrayal. The child. The truth he had buried. And the consequence of facing it. His mind moved with the same precision it always had. But this time, there was something new inside it. Conflict. Not between right and wrong. Between power and something else. Something he had not allowed to exist for years. Responsibility. The baby shifted again, a soft, fragile movement that cut through the silence like something louder, because it was real, unprotected, caught in the center of something far beyond it. And that changed everything. The emotional tension deepened. Power is easy when nothing matters. It becomes dangerous when something does. Dominic took a slow step forward, not toward control, not toward destruction, toward decision, because now he could not delay. The external threat remained, waiting, pressing, ready to strike. Victor Hale's presence was not visible, but it was undeniable, because this moment was exactly what he would want. Dominic forced into a choice, forced into exposure, forced into weakness. Elena felt it too, that invisible pressure tightening around them, because she knew this was not just about what Dominic would do. It was about what others expected him to do. Eliminate the problem. Restore control. End it. Clean. Fast. Final. That was the man the world believed him to be. That was the man he had built himself to become. And now, that was the man being tested. Elena adjusted her stance slightly. The baby still held securely, but her position no longer defensive. Deliberate, because she understood something now. This was no longer her fight alone. This was his. The emotional hook struck deeper. The most defining moments in life are not when you fight others. They are when you decide what you are willing to become. Dominic stopped just in front of her, close enough that there was no distance left, no space for misunderstanding, no room for illusion. His gaze dropped to the child one final time. And this time, there was no calculation, only clarity, because everything had aligned. The past he had buried, the betrayal he had never fully understood, the connection he had refused to see. It all led here, to this moment, to this child. The realization did not come as shock. It came as inevitability, because somewhere deep within everything he had built, this truth had always existed, waiting. The baby was not just Victor Hales. It was something else, something more, a link, a consequence, a living piece of something Dominic had tried to erase and failed. The emotional tension reached its peak. The past does not disappear when you bury it. It waits until it can return in a form you cannot ignore. Dominic exhaled slowly, not out of weakness, but out of understanding, because now the decision was clear. Not easy, but clear. He could end it, right here. Remove the child. remove the truth, remove the risk, and everything would return control. Or he could protect it and allow everything he had built to be challenged, possibly destroyed. The room held still, not frozen, but suspended, because everyone understood something irreversible was about to happen. Elena watched him carefully, not with fear, not with hope, with certainty, because she already knew one thing. Whatever he chose would define him, not just in this moment, forever. Dominic moved. Finally, his hand lifted, not quickly, not aggressively, deliberately. The entire room reacted without moving, because they knew what that motion meant. A decision, final, absolute. And then he did something no one expected. He lowered his hand, slowly, calmly, completely. The shift was immediate, invisible, but undeniable, because in that single action, he had chosen, not control, not destruction, something else. The emotional hook landed with full force. True power is not shown when you destroy what threatens you. It is shown when you choose not to. Elena felt it instantly. Not relief, not safety. Something deeper. A shift, because this moment had changed everything. Dominic's gaze returned to her, steady, unwavering, but no longer the same, because now he wasn't looking at her as a problem, or a threat, or even an opponent. He was looking at her as part of something he could not erase. And that made her dangerous in a completely different way. The room reacted slowly, control attempting to reform, structure trying to rebuild, because Dominic had made a decision that did not align with expectation. And when power breaks expectation, everything becomes unstable. The external pressure remained. Victor Hale's unseen presence did not disappear. If anything, it grew stronger, because now there was something worth attacking, something worth taking. The child, alive, protected, exposed. Elena adjusted her hold on the baby, her body still tense, her awareness sharp, because she understood something critical. This was not over. It had just begun. Dominic stepped back slightly, creating space again, not distance, but balance, because now the situation had changed. It was no longer about eliminating a threat. It was about surviving what came next. The emotional tension softened slightly, but not into peace, into something else, understanding, because both of them now knew the same truth. They were no longer... The room began to move again, slowly, carefully, because control had not been lost, but had been redefined. Dominic's empire still stood, but now it stood on something different, something unstable, something personal. Elena took a slow breath, her mind processing everything that had just happened, because she had not just brought the truth into the room. She had changed the man who controlled it, and that was far more dangerous. The final twist formed not as a sudden shock, but as a quiet, devastating realization. Because as Dominic looked at the child again, one final truth surfaced, not about the present, about the past. Something he had missed, something Victor had never fully revealed, something hidden beneath betrayal. The child was not just a consequence. It was a key to something deeper, something older, something that connected everything he had tried to bury. The emotional hook deepened one last time. The most dangerous truths are not the ones that threaten your future. They are the ones that rewrite your past. Dominic's gaze darkened slightly, not with anger, but with realization, because now he understood this was never just about Victor, never just about power, never just about control. It was about something that had started long before this moment and had never ended. Elena saw it, that final shift, because she knew he had reached the same conclusion she had, and that meant there was no going back. The future stretched ahead, unclear, unstable, dangerous, because now everything had changed, and nothing was under complete control anymore. The final moment settled into silence, not empty, not calm, heavy, because this was not the end. It was the beginning of something far more complex, far more dangerous, far more personal. Dominic Callahan stood there, no longer just a man who controlled everything, but the man who had just chosen something he could not undo. And that choice would define everything that came next. The final cliffhanger landed with chilling certainty. Dominic Callahan realized the truth. He could no longer escape. The baby was never just his rivals. It was a key to everything he had tried to bury.